What's up, guys? I know this isn't the way you're used to seeing me. Usually you're used to seeing a cartoon avatar, but this is one of those times where I feel like I need to actually do the video like this, face to face, because it's about a serious issue. You see, while 7% of the general youth population experience homelessness at some point, 40% of the youth population that experiences homelessness are LGBTQ. If you consider the fact that LGBTQ people really only account for about 5% of the population here in the States, that's a gross overrepresentation. But why does this happen? Well, one of the biggest factors seems to be being forced out of the home for being different, or otherwise having to run away to avoid abuse. Trans youth specifically experience an exponential amount of abuse as well, considering that where they're concerned, there's other psychological factors to take into account. With trans youth, there's aggressive misgendering, the possible need for HRT, possible need for therapy, sometimes voice lessons, and sometimes even surgery, and there's also a need for appropriate clothing that closely matches their gender identity, as opposed to the gender that people think they should be. That's not to say that any LGBTQ person in general experiences issues, but that is to say that where trans people are concerned, there's a lot of them. And if you're experiencing homelessness, it's not like you can afford gender-appropriate clothes or antihistamines. But if you'll allow me, let me paint you a scenario. You're a trans person, and you've moved in with a friend because you've broken up with an ex. This friend has a partner who is generally abusive. Your friend does all the work in the house as well as bringing in all the finances. For better or worse, they should be in charge of the house, but that's not exactly how things are. Your friend's partner hasn't been contributing to the household for 10 years. And now imagine you wake up every day to hear your friend's abusive partner complaining about you constantly. But whenever you ask your friend about it, they tell you that no such conversation happened. But you know it did. You were there. They just didn't know you were there, listening. Whether intentional or not, you're being gaslit. And even though you're being gaslit, you still end up coming out, which now makes you an outcast in the eyes of the abusive partner. They were already complaining about you, and now they know you're trans. Now you're different. You're not just somebody they don't like. Now you're somebody completely different from them. You won't be physically abused, but you will be abused in other ways. Doors are slammed constantly around you. Cupboards are slammed. You're constantly misgendered, and they are always saying things about you or to you that are meant solely to provoke, solely to hurt. Every time they're around you, they can't help but say, "You're a man, you're a man, you're a man." But you know you're not. And it's not like he has the excuse of saying he's family and he's known you for 20 some odd years as someone else and it's just so hard for him to adjust. No, you're a new person. He doesn't have any excuse. This is done solely to hurt. This is done for no other reason but to be abusive. And yet, here you are. What do? Do you ask your friend to talk to their partner about the abuse that you're suffering at their hand? Because they're stuck in the cycle too. They're not going to help you. Because they're a victim as well. And it's very easy for abusers to convince their victims that they're not the problem. You are. Do you take the abuse until the final straw is broke and you break? Or elsewise, take everything away? Leave reality for good? You tell yourself that none of that's an option, and ultimately, that option ends up getting taken away from you anyway. Because you spoke out against the abusive partner, who wasn't just abusing you, but was also abusing your friend, now you're being kicked out. Because it's their house, even though they probably don't deserve to be there. You're the one that has to shoulder the burden of their abuse now. You're the one that gets to suffer. But it's okay. You've got family still. And you have a little bit of work experience. Not much, but it's something. And you can make this work. You just need to find some family members that can help, get you on your feet a little bit, and if they're willing to support you, you might be able to bootstrap yourself, right? So you go to your mom. She's really supportive, and she's glad that you were brave enough to come out as the woman that you actually are. Even with the kind of world we live in that is incredibly hostile to people who don't meet cis expectations. But then it happens. You're at a family gathering. You're fully in the closet to everybody but your mom, and she outs you. The closet door that was once in place as a bulwark of safety that you've been able to use to prevent yourself from dealing with further suffering has been torn off of its hinges by somebody who supposedly wants the best for you. And you let her know that this makes you feel unsafe. You let her know that you don't want the looks and the jeers and the whispers behind your back. You want your family to look at you as normal up until the point where you're ready to come out and let them know that you are trans and you are normal, just not their normal. But that's not what happened, and your mom doesn't understand. Why wouldn't you be out and proud? You came out to her after all, but the fact of the matter is that most of us can come out of the closet to our most steadfast allies and not fear repercussion. But the outside world isn't like that. The outside world isn't kind. And unfortunately, your family can exist in that outside world if they decide that you're the other. If they decide that you're the outcast, they might as well be that outside world. But your mom doesn't listen. She hasn't lived your experiences. She doesn't get it. And worse, she starts to use your true identity only around people she's outing you to. But in private, you're suddenly now a man again. Not only is the outside world unsafe, and she's made it even less safe because you can't even hide in the closet anymore, but the private world is unsafe. It's riddled with thinly veiled abuse. And at home, where that shield should be able to come down, the abuse starts to get worse. Your true name is started to be used sarcastically, especially when she's angry. And when you try to present female to just be you, she tells you that you look weird, that you should be in masculine clothing, and that you should retreat back to being somebody that you aren't. It's not her body. It's not her choice, but what choice do you have? What do you do? Your family is no longer safe. She made certain of that. And your friend is out of the question, obviously, and your mother is slowly pushing you so very close to that edge, and it is so easy to just jump. But you can't. You already told yourself you've got to live. You've got to push on. So, in a show of strength, you leave, and you assure yourself that you'll be okay. You'll be able to make it alone. Even though history has shown that you weren't able to do that very well to begin with, and now that you're out as trans, it's going to be even worse. It's going to be a whole lot harder. Now that you know that you don't belong in your own body, it's going to be a lot harder to belong anywhere else. So you go to a nearby homeless shelter. There's hot food, there's water, a place to sleep, but it's religious, and it's not your religion. They call you a man, and they treat you just the way your mother did. At least all the negative aspects. And what's worse, you only have 2 weeks to find a job, because at this particular homeless shelter, which is the one you have access to, they kick you out if you can't get employed in 2 weeks. And you're trans. It's going to be that much harder for you to get employed. Because of all this uprooting you've had to do, a stable job is the last thing you've had a chance to even work out how to start getting again. So, you were also in college. But it's not like that's an option for you now either. You can't even afford college. You can't afford proper medical care. You can't afford therapy, HRT, or anything else you might be needing. You might not even be able to afford clothes that are gender appropriate. You've really got nowhere to go. And the timeline for employment is drawing a whole lot closer. And even when you do get employed, what do you actually have to look forward to in the road ahead? It's not just an uphill battle. The sleek, smooth wall that's right in front of you is not something you're going to be able to climb very easily, especially not alone. You don't even have the tools to start climbing. So what do you do? What can you actually do? In this situation, you don't have a place to be, you don't have a job to do, you don't have anything going for you except for the fact that you know who you are, which is something you didn't have a few years ago, but now everything else is falling apart. So what do you do? The truth is, I don't know. And this whole scenario might seem like a worst-case reductio just so I can make the video dramatic and point out that these are things that happen, and by using this hypothetical scenario, I can show you guys what kind of a world we live in and what kinds of things we want to change. But I've got some bad news. This isn't a hypothetical scenario. This isn't a reductio to show the problems that trans folk deal with. This is the story of a YouTuber who many of you have seen on my channel already, Atheist Rationale, or as she's now known, Shay. Shay has been a huge help to this channel, and she's researched and co-hosted videos and live streams, and has gone over Matt Powell's Science Falsely So-Called movie and has been there for every episode she was able to make it to. She's also helped in digging up much of what we know about the inner workings of the NIFB. And speaking of the NIFB, Shay is in Arizona. That's the main hub of the NIFB. That's where Steven Anderson's based. They're not exactly people you want to run into if you're trans. They're not exactly people you want having influence on any of the religious infrastructure in your area that is directly tied to your homeless shelters. So why did I make this video? Well, there are two reasons. First and foremost, I'm trying to raise some awareness for Shay personally. If you're an employer in the Tucson, Arizona area and can help out, or know one that can help out, then they need a job. They're on that ticking time clock, and they need it fast. There's a week and a half to go. On top of that, if any other resources can be given, even up into including a temporary home, it would be better than being constantly misgendered and given psychological maltreatment whilst in a homeless shelter that is dominated by religious dogma. For anything else, I'll be providing a link to their Twitter as well as a link to their Discord in my description. If you want to get in contact with Shay, that's the best way to get in contact with her. Elsewise, if you don't feel comfortable doing so, then you can talk to me and I can get you guys in contact. The secondary goal and the long-term goal for this video was to also try to raise awareness about how this sort of thing affects trans people, how it affects real people who you might even know. Me personally, I've dealt with homelessness. I've lived out of an SUV with Raz before. I know what situations like this are like, and I know they're less than ideal. In my situation, I at least had a job. But if you've ever been homeless, it's strangely expensive to be homeless. A lot of the things that you can do to cut costs in a home, you can't exactly do when you don't have a shelter. You can't exactly make a lot of the things that you can do for yourself. You can't microwave meals the way that you want. You can't do things that cut costs. It's a lot more expensive to be homeless than you think. It's really weird. So, I've been there. Hell, maybe you have too. And if you can help in some way, I'm not trying to do a fundraiser or anything like that, but if you can help, either by employment or elsewise, then please get in contact with Shay. I have their stuff. You can get in contact with them. Look in the description. Elsewise, contact me. I know this isn't my usual thing, but Shay has been a huge help to this channel over the past year, and I want to make sure that I'm doing what I can to help raise awareness not just for their situation, but for situations that trans people have to deal with in general. I know I just did a video recently on hostile architecture that you can see here in about a day. That's another issue that homeless people have to deal with, but this one's maybe a little closer to home and a little more important to me. So if you did make it to the end of the video, then thank you for watching. I know this isn't my usual content, but this is also very important stuff. Please consider lending a hand, maybe even just a kind word. I know that they'll be reading this comment section. And as always, everyone, insert end video tagline here.